Hi, and welcome back. Today we are at the Hawkins Ranch, and we're going to go over the 10 reasons why you don't want to have animals in North Idaho, especially in the wintertime. I'm going to be here with Kiley, and she's also the owner of Elwood Farms out in Newport. Let's go say hi. All right, I'm here with Kiley. She helps runs the Hawkins Ranch here in Sandpoint. She's also the owner of the Elwood Ranch out in Newport. You have a hay business, and you do a lot. I'll have you kind of talk about what you do.
So it kind of depends on the time of year, but in the winter, my husband and I run the cattle business of his family's here at the ranch. And then in the summertime, we do harvest hay for selling as well as the hay we need for the ranch.
And the hay's all over the place. I mean, you hay up near where we live. We're 15, 20 minutes from here.
Yeah, so all of our fields are mostly leased ground from other people that we are able to harvest hay off of their property. And then we have storage barns between Newport, Priest River, and Sandpoint.
So Kiley, she knows what she's talking about. She's going to give us a small tour around their farm. Pay attention to what she has to say. She's been doing this for a long time. She's really knowledgeable. Let's go start our tour. All right, the first thing we're going to talk about is feeding livestock in the wintertime.
Yeah, so the simple answer is you have to feed animals a lot more in the winter time than you normally do in the summer or springtime during a maintenance diet. So for our first version of food that we like to feed is our what we call forage diet. And that is hay, no alfalfa or legumes or grain, but grasses, Timothy orchard, brome mixes are what we use for our cattle, and it's also a good feed for our horses and goats. Pigs are a little bit different, but they also eat more in the winter to stay warm.
Now, why not grain?
So grain, the way that animals stay warm is by digesting their food, and so grain is a fast digester. So the slower they digest, the longer it takes them to digest, and the more fermentation that can happen within that gut, and keep them warmer for longer.
All right, the second reason why you don't want to have animals in North Idaho, additional information on feeding in the wintertime.
So of course we have different, all of our livestock have different needs in the winter time depending on their life stages. So of course we have lactating cattle, we have pregnant cattle, we also have our older animals and as well as our younger weanlings. So all of them have different needs and different nutritional value that they need to keep weight on and keep healthy in the winter time. And that's where our additives come in as far as our legumes such as alfalfa, oats, and barley, as well as any grains. And then we also do a mineral and salt diet as well to make sure that they're keeping up on their salt intake, and then that also increases their water intake, which is really important in the wintertime.
And this isn't done just like every other month. I mean, this is like a routinely thing that
Yeah.
you have to do every day to check, make sure that they have this available.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a daily thing that changes, depending on how they're doing on their current diet. Changes in length of gestation, length of their calving window, how long they've been lactating. All of these things we take into consideration.
Water and food are essential. So, how do you deliver food and water to the animals in the wintertime?
Yeah, so it does become quite a chore in the wintertime compared to summer and spring. We're dealing with everything frozen, and then obviously the animals needing more nutrients in the wintertime. So as far as their water needs, we use tank heaters to heat the water, and that also allows them to drink more. They're more apt to drink if their water is a little bit warmer, rather than just cold ponds. We do, however, have our larger herd of cattle on just a regular water source, and they do just fine on that as well. So it just kind of depends again on the life stage of the animal and what our goal is.
So, is it a good idea for the animals long term? Can they just eat the snow?
Yeah, so it takes a lot of energy for an animal to take snow and warm it up and convert it into the water that they need. So as a long-term solution, that's not really ideal for them to keep weight and keep that extra
So
nutrients and energy that they
you're
need.
going to spend more money in feed because then they have to replace that
Yeah.
energy.
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly.
Fourth reason why you don't want to have animals in North Idaho, especially during the winter time, is the storing of food and delivery of food. So what's the best way, or what are the different methods to store the food and deliver it?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways that we store food and deliver it to our animals. The probably least expensive is we tarp it. The main thing that you want to do is keep it dry, both on the bottom side, any moisture from the ground. Pallets work really well. And then from the top side, keeping it away from rain and snow, keeping mold and bacteria out of those bales. And then that goes for any grains as well, keeping it in totes that mice can't get into or other animals. And then the biggest thing for delivering food is keeping your driveways clear to be able to get either yourself or equipment in to move the food to where you need it.
And kind of going off of that too is you have to have a path to get to the animal. So it's not just getting
Yeah.
it to the food, it's getting to the animals as well.
Yeah, so keeping your pathways clear is a big thing that we do pretty routinely, almost daily here in the winter.
Yeah,
So,
especially this season.
yeah, exactly. Yep. The more snow, the more we're worried about keeping that snow out of our pens and out of the way for us to keep our food.
Yeah, and if you guys have been watching for a while, we did a video on snow plowing and pushing the snow further back than what you actually need. Because if we just continuously get snow, you got to have a place to put it. So if you only put it clear off the area that you need, but we get more snow, now you're kind of
Yeah.
trapping yourself. So
Yeah.
you really got to push it out of the way.
Your driveways and walkways become very narrow really quickly that
Yeah,
way.
they do.
Yep.
We had that experience last year.
Yep. So that brings me to a lot of the equipment that we use here is probably oversized for the general homesteading need, but depending on your herd is kind of the equipment that you want to have around the farm, whether that be, an ATV or a tractor, varying in sizes, or if it's just a couple of animals that you have, a wheelbarrow will work just fine to kind of deliver the hay and other food as well as water supplies that you need to get to your animals.
Okay, so you said this was one of the least expensive ways. Probably the preferred, and it's going to cost a little bit more money, would be what?
Yeah, so as you can see, we also have hay barns that we store most of our hay into, and that is a long-term storage. We're able to store that all winter without any worry of moisture getting into the barns, but that is the most expensive. However, it is the most long-term solution to storing food.
Best practices.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so in North Idaho, it gets cold. Animals need shelters. We need shelters. Looking at the shelters for these cows right now, they're not going to keep me warm. Can we talk a little bit about what they need for their needs in the wintertime?
Yeah, so sheltering is important for the animals, but of course they have a full set of fur that we don't have that is made for keeping them warm. And with that, the shelters that we have are lean-tos. We specifically make them so they are three-sided. Preferring the side to the south for wind chill purposes is really the main reason that we provide shelter. Keep them out of the wet and keep them away from the wind. For the most part, as long as you can keep the wind off of them, they're going to stay warm.
So I know what my opinion on providing, and not necessarily for cows, but for chickens and goats. I know some people like to put heat lamps inside of a building. I don't like to do it. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I guess with this it would be more livestock oriented with cows, goats, chickens. You do want to have a full housing system. Depending on the amount of chickens you have, usually they can keep themselves warm within their own structure, whether it's insulated or uninsulated. The main reason to keep lights on them or heat sources in the winter would be to keep up your egg production. But other than that, they usually can stay warm if they're enclosure is actually pretty small, so you don't want to oversize their enclosure with too little animals. When you're dealing with chickens, you want to kind of keep that enclosure small, keep them pretty tight packed, and that will keep them warm and be able to heat and insulate that area by themselves.
Now, what about pigs? Because I'm super interested in this because this is the first winter that we're keeping a pig.
Yeah.
We have a nice four-sided lean-to essentially, and keeping straw and pine shavings in there, but is there
Yeah.
anything additional for pigs?
Yeah, so not needing necessarily to keep the walls insulated, but having a full, at least 3 sides, but then that fourth side either being with like a cloth or some sort of doorway that kind of keeps them warm. They are able to keep their own space warm once they're in there and providing their own heat, but yeah, keeping them also in a smaller enclosure that they're able to keep their own space warm.
Yeah, what I've noticed is they like to burrow into the ground, and obviously that's a lot warmer once you start
Yeah.
digging. So
yeah, the geothermal part of that, that's going to keep them just as warm. Doing a nice layer of bedding will add to that as well, keep that insulated.
in Idaho, obviously it's cold. A lot of people have horses up here. Do they need blankets?
Yeah, so that's absolutely a tricky question that a lot of people have a lot of different opinions on. And I think the biggest reason is because everyone has different horses with different needs. So depending, a lot of it is, the age of the horse, the breed of the horse, what their hair coat looks like, what their body condition score going into winter looks like. Those are all big factors into whether or not to blanket. And then in addition, just every day kind of re-gauging that, whether it's wet or snowy, and kind of just knowing that they are able to also keep themselves warm with just their own hair as well.
So it's my understanding, because we have a few horses, we don't have a shelter right now. They're just kind of out in the woods. They have a blanket. We have a lot of friends that have horses. They build lean-tos, they build a stable, if you will, or a barn. But it seems like horses, they like to be out like this, like these horses, more than being inside of an enclosure.
Yeah, and I've heard that more oftentimes than not. Someone will build a really nice barn and they don't want to be in it most of the time. And horses, they will kind of gauge what they need. So they're not going to be outside if they're cold, and they know where the warm spot is away from the wind. So if they're outside, that's where they want to be at the moment.
The seventh reason why you don't want to have animals in the wintertime is outdoor clothing.
Yeah, so I would say nowadays, my husband and I have learned that that's a well done investment. Is any clothes that we purchase for the winter time and the summer and spring, is a completely different wardrobe.
Beanies, we both have one. I didn't have my gloves today,
Yeah.
but when you're working outside, having something that's waterproof, that wicks the water away.
Yeah, and even gloves, layering, doing a base layer as well as a waterproof layer within these, is fleece, but then also having a slick outside layer so then no hay sticks to it,
Yeah.
are all things that we consider when we're purchasing clothes.
Yeah, and I, off topic a little bit, but with snow plowing, I get those ski pants on, and
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have to get any special pants on throughout the season.
Yeah, so we definitely wear our insulated outer layers, our bibs and overcoats and such. Any of that ski type gear we've noticed doesn't last too long just
Right.
because, we're always cutting it on barbed wire or
Oh,
such.
yeah.
But, that those thicker materials, they last a little bit longer and tend to wick away the moisture just as well, and keep all the other things away. So
Carhartt.
yeah, Carhartt's a
Not
big
sponsored by Carhartt, but great
Yeah.
brand. North 40.
Yep, Carhartt, Smith and Rogue is a good one
Yeah.
now through North 40. I think it's just finding those honestly little brands that are just really good at what they do with that one thing. We have a lot of Outback equipment as well.
Yeah. The eighth reason why you don't want to have animals in the wintertime is just having the equipment on hand, because things are going to go south, fences are going to break, something's going to break. So what type of equipment or stuff do you need to keep on hand?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is just preparedness early on, before the snow hits, before we get our weather for the year. Just being prepared, making sure you have all your tank heaters, your hoses are fixed and ready to go, having fence fixing tools on hand, any, wire you need, extra boards, that kind of thing, just having it on hand, ready to go when you need it. As well as for your animals themselves, having a good vet box. Your local vet can definitely help you put one of those together. Just having all the food you need for the winter. You never know when a storm will hit, when power will go out, when you'll need that stuff right away and not have access to get to it.
Right.
The other thing is just knowing your neighbors, I think, is a big one. Having their phone number on hand. I know our neighbors have saved our butts 100 times, just, if we need something extra that we didn't have or ran out of, they're always going to be there.
Animal gets out.
Yeah.
Like
Well, yeah.
our animals get out all the time. And like last season, our neighbor, he had a cow, Mavis, and she escaped, and we went trekking like a half mile, caught her, and brought her back on the ice. That was not fun at all. But yeah, I think that's huge. Is just being a good neighbor and helping out when.
Yeah, and it'll always come back around. Having a
Yep.
good community around you makes all the difference in making this a little bit easier.
100%. All right, number 9 on the reasons why you don't want to have animals in North Idaho is time. Having animals is time consuming.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, depending on the amount of animals you have, how quickly you get into this, whether you have, a full-time job that you're also trying to support your homes and the livestock operation, it really is time consuming and takes a lot more time than people realize. It's not just, a once a week thing or even a once a day thing. It's a constant checking, feeding, keeping up on the maintenance of the animals.
Because it doesn't matter if there's a whiteout. The horses, the pigs, the cows, they have to eat. They have to have water. So if there's a power outage and now their water's starting to freeze, they still need to be taken care of. They can't go and get their hay that's 200 feet away.
Yeah, yep. I mean, they need to eat, and they usually eat before we do, and that's an everyday thing, and it's a lifestyle. It's not just a hobby for sure. But there are ways to do it as a hobby, but it's the main thing that I would say about that is you're going to have a lot less animals than you would think to
Yeah.
make it, just a hobby.
Yeah, so if you're a family and you planning to have all these different animals, but you're going to still have a career to provide for the animals and for yourself,
Yeah.
I mean, you really have to consider how much time that's going to take you.
Yeah, and my suggestion is, start small. Smaller animals usually means
Chickens.
less time. Yeah, so start with chickens. Gain your routine with one set of animals at a time. Have your flock, then have your pit. Like gain your daily routine, and it will add up, and you'll know when you kind of hit your breaking point as to how many. For us, that was 600 cows, but we did pare
Just
that.
600.
Yeah, we did pare that down a little bit, but it does make a difference in your day to day how many animals.
So what I
you
hear
have.
you saying is start small,
Yeah.
master that,
Yeah.
add something, master that, and then once you know what you fulfilled, you just don't want to go buy 10 horses, 100 cows, 500 chickens, and be
Yeah.
like, oh my God, what is going on?
Yeah, and that's how people get overwhelmed really quickly, and you'd be surprised how quickly it does add up, and you do start acquiring animals, because it's easy to do once you start and you have the land and you have the space and you have the shelter, but it is nice to know mostly what you're doing with one before you kind of move on to the next one.
Excellent. Yep. So number 10 and final on the list of reasons why you shouldn't have animals in North Idaho is going to be the money. We've covered a lot of topics. There's time, there's feed, there's creating paths, there's having the right equipment, but probably where it really comes down to is money, because this isn't cheap. There's so much into it. Like everything I just talked about costs money, and it's not cheap. So what can people kind of expect with cost?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing with cost is knowing what you're going to get out of it. Every animal on the farm should have a purpose, and with that purpose hopefully comes an income for you, but it always doesn't always work out that way. So you're bound to lose investment at some point with it. But as far as your startup costs, that's going to be only the beginning, really.
Right.
People think, oh, I have my startup costs, and then I'm good to go. But really, it's just a continuous.
Animals get hurt.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, horses is a prime example of that.
Oh yeah.
As far as the veterinary costs, feed costs, it's always something. As they get older, as they have more needs. What to do with that. But then also a big part of that is knowing the animal's purpose, and following through with that purpose, and knowing when they no longer serve your farm. I think that's a big part of it, and knowing why they were here in the first place, and being able to make those difficult decisions at times.
Yeah, and as everyone can see, you guys have a ton of horses, and I know for horses, for you guys, you're deep rooted into the community. You know a lot of people in 4-H with horses, so you guys actually kind of help some of those kids out with some of the horses.
We help with 4-H horse as well as steer and pig. Those are kind of the areas that we help with. We lease out horses for 4-H kids, as well as just having a lot of family around that age that's in that program, as well as the steers. We also sell 4-H steers and 4-H pigs also.
Yeah, so there you have it. Those are the 10 reasons why you don't want to own animals in the wintertime.